Hey gamers, it's me Mecha. Today I want to bring you a topic about the recent changes to the Tyler's rules philosophy, Tyler's as a format, and my thoughts on the subject as a whole. Now, for those of you who may not know exactly what I am speaking about, pretty recently, Tyler's Rules Committee voted on a rules change to the format as a whole as to how we define what cards are legal in Tiny Leaders Reborn. And essentially, what it boiled down to is the previous rules were we were allowing any card with mana value 3 or less, but manually excluding MDFCs. And we decided that manually excluding MDFCs was too vague, it wasn't future proof, and overall the committee decided they weren't happy with that rules change. So they went in and they had a debate, and two competing schools of thought emerged from said debate. Competing school of thought number one, we're going to refer to as Team Inquisition. Team Inquisition is a simple, purist, any card with mana value 3 or less is legal. Period, point blank. Any card. Adventures, as long as that mana value is 3, good. Valky, mana value 3 or less, great. Doesn't matter, has a backside of 7. Doesn't matter, this can be cast for 5. It doesn't matter. As long as you can search it in Scryfall as mana value less than 4, and it pops up, it's a legal Tiny Leaders card if it isn't on the ban list. And the second school, which is Team Perception Bubblehead, or as we're going to hereby refer to it, Team Bubblehead, which is that, okay, well, we recognize that all cards with mana value 3 or less should be legal in this format, but we think that they should only be legal if they're all parts of them are independently castable for 3 or less. So Balluna, not legal, because it has an independent part of the card, Seek Thrills, which is not castable for 3 or less mana. Same thing, Valky. But this then allowed for cards like Fire Ice, which has mana value 4, but 2 cards on the card, which are both independently less than 3, to be allowed into Tiny Leaders. Or cards like Grand HOA, Elegant Rotunda, which both, again, independent, 3 or less, but together, mana value 5. And after much debate, discussion, the Tiny Leaders Rules Committee came to a vote, and they voted for Team Bubblehead overall, and this is what we've currently been playing with. This has been the format legality as of right now. Now, this is where I come in. I have an issue with both of these competing schools of philosophy, and I'd like to propose a solution, as well as to give my thoughts on why I think my solution is an elegant one that can work for the future of this format and be where we go from there. So first of all, let's address Team Inquisition. The things that I like about Team Inquisition is that it is gameplay pure. It is extremely, extremely gameplay pure. In the game itself, you can Inquisition either of these 2 cards out of somebody's hand. But you have to check it, because you can't abruptly the backside of a Valky, or long goodbye the backside of a Valky. You can't liquefy the backside of a Valky. And, for example, it has a casting of more than 3, so you can backside a Valky off of Perception Bubblehead. And Team Bubblehead, which is deck building pure. So deck building pure, okay, we're saying, cool, we're not going to be able to build decks with cards that can be cast for an independent cost of 3 or 5, or 2 or 7, but we're cool with cards like Fire Ice, for example, which are, we're in this case, for Tiny Leaders now, for the purposes of Tiny Leaders, are 2 independent cards on the same piece of cardboard, each having a mana value 2. Same thing here, using Grand Entryway Elegant Rotunda as an example. It is 2 pieces of card, 2 different cards on the same piece of cardboard. For the purposes of Tiny Leaders, one has a mana value 2, the other has a mana value 3. They ignore each other in terms of deck building. So this is very pure for gameplay in terms of Inquisition. This is very pure for deck building in terms of Bobblehead. Now here's my proposed system. Here I'm using the card Think Twice because we're going to perform a dual check, so we have to think twice about what we're doing. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check the mana value of the card itself. Here we're using Cut to Ribbons and Miles Morales as an example. So Cut to Ribbons has a mana value 4. So Cut to Ribbons, for the purposes of dual check, cannot be Inquisition and of Kozilek. So because mana value 4. Miles Morales has mana value 2. Would be legal under Team Inquisition, but it has a backside which is castable for 5. So you couldn't liquefy it, abrupt decay it, or long goodbye it, for example. So my proposal is we do 2 checks. One for mana value, and then one for the parts of the card. So we're going to again use our friend here, Miles Morales, as our example, where we're going to first check, okay, yes, Miles Morales has mana value 3. It would be legal in Tiny Leaders, because mana value of 3 or less. But we're going to then perform a secondary check of, okay, well now what other parts of the card, so for the example here, the backside of Ultimate Spider-Man would make this card illegal because it has a availability to be cast for 5 mana from the command zone. Now, this does bring up some whatabouts, which are going to be some examples over here. So, for the example purposes of what I'm doing here, we're using Cyclonic Rift and Rocco Cabaret Caterer. Excuse me. Now, both of these cards would be legal under either of these 2 systems, and indeed they would be legal under the dual check system. But both of these cards have the ability to be cast for more than 3, which I just said we shouldn't be able to do. And so you're going to say, but Mecha, what about X whatever thing you want to call it? Well, okay, so let's start with Cyclonic Rift as our example. Cyclonic Rift always has casting cost 2, period. You can always spell snare Cyclonic Rift, even if you overload it. Overload is merely an ability of the card itself. It is not a way to cast that card in a different way. So, like Seek Thrills, like Ultimate Spider-Man, like Tibalt Cosmic Imposter. So it's not another piece of cardboard on the same card. It's the same card, just doing a different thing. Now, we get to our friend Rocco, which is the stand-in for all X spells. X spells, very notably, have a variable mana value. You could go X is 0, or you could go X is infinite. And anywhere along that range. Well, this is where the secondary check comes into play. Rocco, baseline in terms of deck, in terms of actual deck construction, passes the first check of, okay, is mana value 3 or less? And also, in terms of gameplay, if I put a Rocco under a Perception bobblehead, I could legally cast it via Perception bobblehead for X is 0. So it passes both schools of thought into the check. So passes the dual check. It does not matter that the card itself has the ability to be cast for more. because once it's actually on the battlefield, it can get Abrupt Decayed, it can get Long Goodbye. But here's the thing. There's an edge case that has been rightfully brought up in a Liquefy. A Liquefy allows you to exile a spell with mana value 3 from the stack. So Liquefy could always exile Psychology Rift, but it could not always exile Rocco, because Rocco has variable, can go up to infinite. I personally believe that the hybrid between the deck building of Inquisition and the gameplay of Perception Bobblehead that the dual check provides is enough reason for us to continue to allow X spells to exist in the format beyond just the precedent of, well, we've always had them. Why not? Why would we ban them now? Also, we are attempting to define the future of a format. It is a difficult thing. Any three of these have their own independent questions about them, or their own independent issues. And I would be remiss to say that dual check is perfect. It's not. I don't think. But I think of the three, it allows for the mix between deck construction and gameplay together to form something a little bit better. I am of the opinion that Inquisition school of thought hurts the deck construction. I really don't want to be able to see Essicas or Horn of Harmfells or Valkyries or anything like that. That really just takes me out of Tiny Leaders. You know, to see something like that in Command Zone or like an Eddie Brock, you're only ever going to cast the big side of these, for example, like Tibalt or Ultimate Spider-Man or Venom. You're only ever going to cast it for the big side, for those cards. And for like the Adventure, it's kind of just a passive, well, we're getting it because you couldn't cast it off the Bubblehead. You can only cast the one side. So we're getting it with the tech check just purely by happenstance. But I think it's good because it's a little bit of a future-proofing thing. Overall, with the dual check, I think the biggest argument against it is the complexity of explaining it to people. Inquisition is definitely the simplest in those terms. It's very easy. Mana value 3, cool, playable in Tiny Leaders. I think the second easiest is the dual check. Okay, mana value 3, yes, but we need to check to make sure there are no other individual cards on the card that allow this to be independently cast for more than 3. And then Bubblehead, I think, is the most complex, where it's like mana value 3, except for all these cards on this long list of cards that are mana value 4 or sometimes mana value 5 or 6, but they both have mana value like 1, 2, or 3 on either side, and it's just a lot of like, well, this is an exception, this is an exception, this is an exception. Which is my big issue. It's like, okay, well, now we have an actual gameplay issue where, legally speaking, in current Tiny Leaders, this following exact situation could happen to you. You could be playing your mono black discard deck against somebody else's Gearson Star and Kellenborf deck. And you could be somewhere in the mid game, let's say, just for funsies. And you could cast your Inquisition of Tozalek to targeting them. Let's say they have 3 cards in hand, because it's the mid-game, and it's land, fire, ice. You can't take anything in this situation through no fault of your own. And in the same vein, you can cast off of Perception Bobblehead either of these 2 cards on the front side, so you can cast Blue to Grant's Claw. You can cast Falcon Godflies off of Perception Bobblehead. You can't cast the Seek Thrills. You can't cast the Tibble, but they're legally, you can play them under this. So that's why we should check. It's important to do both halves because this is a gameplay importance. This is a deck building importance. Currently, we're replacing all of the emphasis on deck construction. This is a deck construction restriction, much in the same vein as color identity. My proposal is to add then the additional gameplay restriction on top of it, which does kind of bring me back around to the X spells, which is, well, why is X or Overload cool, but flip cards are not? And once again, I'd like to encourage you to consider the ability of the card versus the actual multiple cards. The ability of Cyclonic Rift of Overload is not considered when Inquisition or Liquefy or Perception Bobblehead, for example, are being played. The ability of, well, not ability, but the casting cost of Rocco of having X in his casting cost is not considered when Abrupt Decaying a Rocco that's on the battlefield, Long Goodbying a Rocco that's on the battlefield, Inquisitioning a Rocco out of somebody's hand, playing it off of the Perception Bobblehead. The only place where it is considered is the stack, which is a gameplay part of everything. I think this is the best hybrid between what is allowable in terms of the deck and what is allowable in terms of the stack, where we kind of meet in the middle. And yes, we do still have some X cases. I'm not saying dual check is perfect, but I do think it's a nice happy medium between the two, and it allows for an ease of use for Tiny Leaders players. It provides us with the least number of feel bads because of these options. Liquefy could, under the current rules, can't counter Fire Ice, Grand Way, Elegant Rotunda. It can't counter Cut Ribbons, it can't counter Ultimate Spider-Man, and it couldn't counter Rocco. X is more than 0. So that is factual under current rules. And it would remain so, but we would remove the possibility of seeing all but one of those cards in the case of Rocco or any other X. Again, Rocco is just the stand-in for X in this case. I hope that this video has kind of explained my position. I know that there will probably be questions. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure that I am not the most eloquent proponent of the dual check. I know that there are at least 2 or 3 other vocal proponents of the ideal. But overall, I really just wanted to put this out into the world so that people can kind of begin to understand why I think we should go to the dual check over the Perception Bobblehead. Thank you so much for your time, and stay tidy.